Well, after everything you've been through with surgery and swapping cars the year before, how much of a surprise was it in 1979 for you to be in contention for a championship in 1979 after all that happened?
Well, after not winning the race in 50, 60, 70, 78, was that when 78?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Then we just wrote that off and said, okay, it's just a bad year. No matter, you have good years, bad years, and I guess we was doing something wrong, but we didn't know it. But in the middle of the season, so we'd started that season with a Dodge, and then we finally figured out we just wasn't getting nowhere with it, so we switched to Chevrolet. So we was in the process of learning. My brother was learning with Chief, working on the engine stuff, working on a Chevrolet engine instead of a Dodge engine, so he had to learn all over again. So it took us a little while to put all that together. And then by 79, 79, everybody had, I think, 77, 78 Oldsmobiles or something. So we go out and buy us a car from some lady down here in the country somewhere to bring it back in, work on it, and get it all fixed up and go down and actually wind up winning the race. And in the meantime, the car that we'd run before, Kyle wanted to start driving, so Chief built him an engine, sent him down there, and he wound up winning the ARCA race, first race he'd ever sit. He'd never sat down in a race car on the racetrack. And of course, the car was so much better than any other ARCA cars. All he had to do was miss everybody, but he wound up winning the race. And then come down on the Sunday deal, and everything just worked our way. It was one of them deals. Is that when Cale and them got in a fight?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, we done been outrun. We was racing third, racing with Ford and
DW.
W. Yeah. And so anyhow, then we was 20 seconds behind. I mean, we couldn't even see them in front. They didn't run off and left us. And then coming off of second turn, the caution lights come on, and so we said, okay, now I gotta beat these two guys, and I'll be third. I mean, it's pretty good, you know what I mean, because we had such a bad year before, and we gave it down the back stretch, and just as we cut to go in the third corner, our sits number one, number two car down on the infield. We didn't do anything different, and Darrell and them didn't do anything different. We was racing for third place. We just happened to be, the other two guys just stopped somewhere, and we wound up winning the race. So, that got us back in the go deal, because we won a race, we got to going, and then then we raced with Darrell. Darrell ran second that day, and then we raced him for the point stand the whole year, and still wound up, I think, in Ontario, California, the last race, we wound up beating him by 5 or 6 points or whatever it was.
Yeah, you went in that race leading him by 2 points, I think it was. So what was your mindset going into Ontario?
Okay, do what now?
I thought you were leading him by 2 points.
Well, I don't.
DW led.
DW led.
Yeah, he was ahead of us in the
Sorry.
point.
What was
by
your
a couple of
mindset
points.
then?
Okay, so at that time they give you a point or two for leading the race, and so we took off, and before the race started, I think I must have started up front, first or second somewhere, and Buddy Baker was up there, and I told Buddy, I said, look, run a few laps here, how about letting me lead a lap, okay? All right. So, he pulls over and lets me, I guess both of us took off and left everybody. And so I lead a lap or two, so I go into the point lead, okay? So then I let Buddy go back, and then we raced. And then Darrell and them then tried to say, okay, we're behind in the points. They started looking at the points instead of the race, I think. And so I think they stayed out on one of the caution flags or something, and got and was able to get back in the point lead. And then when they did, they got back 7th or 8th or somewhere, and then somebody spun out, and he wound up spinning out, I think. Yeah. And then I think I won run fourth or fifth in the race or something. We didn't win the race, but we still had enough points to beat him. I think we beat him by a couple of positions on the racetrack.
He was evidently pretty tight going into that race. He was evidently feeling the pressure. Did you feel any kind of pressure?
I never had the pressure. What pressure is? You know, no, really, with 4 or 5 races to go, they had a couple 100-point lead on us.
Yeah.
And we go to Dover, and I wind up winning the race, and I think he falls out.
Yeah.
So we catch up a bunch of points. And we go to Atlanta, and we're back and forth the rest of the season. There wasn't 3 or 4 races left. And so we caught up a bunch of points. But what they did, they got the point racing, and we got the racing to try to win the race. I mean, and, you know, out of the 7 championships, I think I've come down to the last race on a couple of them that we had to finish in front of whoever was racing with. I think we beat Allison one time in Texas to win a championship. And so we always went out and said, look, if you win the race, you're going to get more points than anybody else. Forget about running 10th and letting somebody else run 11th or 9th. And so we just went out and tried to win the race, and whatever was going to be there was going to be there. So I don't think – I think what they done, they got to thinking too much about the point standing, about the points and stuff, instead of saying, okay, Darrell, we're just going to go out and try to win the race or run as good as we can. And when they got to figuring, they outfigured themselves, I guess.
You kind of touched on this, but after the race, you sounded more disappointed in not winning the race than you were excited about winning the championship. Was winning championships at that point, was it old hat to you?
You know, just winning a championship was like winning a race back then. It was not it was a big deal, okay? But it was financially and stuff, it didn't really change my position where I was at and what I was doing. It was just like, okay, you know, you won 7 races this year, but you also won the 7th championship. Big deal. You know what I mean? You just took it in stride and said, okay, you know, at the beginning of the year, you didn't even think about the championship. You know, now, the first time we go to Daytona for the first race, the guy jumps out and says, man, I'm leading the point standing. I mean, you still got 35 races to go. I mean, they're looking for points every race, trying to lead a lap or finish, you know, one of the deals in the race where they have the
win a stage.
You know what I mean? Win a stage.
Yeah.
They're looking at that. Oh man, that's 1 point. You know, forget all that crap. You know, you go out and win races, and you're going to win the championship. It's pretty dadgum simple.
You mentioned the fact that you don't feel pressure. What's pressure? What is it in your makeup that causes you to feel that way? Is that something that you developed over time? Is that something you've always had?
I guess I've had it all along. It's one of the deals where fate is, you don't overcome fate. Things are going to happen whether you do things or not. You do what you think is right. Sometimes it works, sometimes it don't. And when it's over with, you got to forget about it. You know, if I went back in my life right now and changed one thing, I wouldn't be sitting here. Look at all the people. In other words, if I went back and won another race or run second in a race, then that would change everybody else's life too. Think about it. You know what I mean? So when people say, you know, if you had your life to live over, what would you do different? I wouldn't do anything different. Things, I've made a bunch of mistakes, don't get me wrong. But if I'd have corrected those mistakes at that time, I'd be in a different position now. People around me would be in different position. So fate's a funny thing, man. You just go with it, and if you have a bad day, so what? I mean, just like this past week, we broke something that nobody's ever broken in a race car, okay? What can you do about it? You can't say, well, it's my fault, your fault, whoever built it's fault. It just happens. So you say, okay, just mark that off. Okay, now we're getting ready to go to Richmond. Okay, you know, forget Martinsville. We had a bad day. We just mark it off and go on down the line.